Hold on, wait 1 second before you.
Oh, sorry. We join, or this is the public dimension of Act Together. We practice 5. We join or develop community organizing efforts through which we identify mutual interests, research issues, conduct power analyses, and act together to promote greater justice for human communities in the community of creation. So here's my story, and Robin is going to give me an assist with some slides as we go along here. Okay. When I went to Central Europe just recently this summer to Budapest, Vienna, Prague, and some small Austrian and German towns along the Danube River, I thought I was just accompanying Robin and her mom, Regina, on a bucket list adventure for Regina. It never occurred to me that I would be taking a deep dive into the bloody history of European Christendom simply by visiting these countries, which it turns out were central to the Holy Roman Empire and its 1,000-year domination system. But I hadn't reckoned on the power of art and architecture to bring the past to life in both vibrant and frightening ways. All you have to do is walk into virtually any castle, abbey, or cathedral to experience a full frontal assault of the anti-Semitism, anti-Islamic sentiment, and the fusion of the cross and sword in European Christian culture, if you have the eyes to see. So here's an example. This is a statue that we saw on the Charles Bridge. It's a famous 14th century bridge in Prague. And when I looked at this statue closely, I was shocked. On the top are the two figures that represent a saint and a bishop. I'm not sure exactly of their identities, but notice that there are 3 figures around the base that are straining to bear up the weight of the Christian heroes on the pedestal, who have clearly subjugated them. One figure represents a weeping demon. The second figure, or a second figure, represents the Ottoman Turks, which were very active in this part of the world. And it reads on it in Latin, 8,000 Saracens under allegiance to the Catholic Church. And the third figure reads in Latin, if I read the number correctly, 25,000 Jews under allegiance to Christ. These last 2 figures represent the forcible conversion and conquest of Jews and Muslims. So every day, millions of residents and tourists admire statues like this throughout Central Europe. So being a Protestant in the US, I had never appreciated before just how much of the iconography of art and architecture in Europe represents, glorifies, and memorializes violence. Either violence done in the name of Christ to others, or violence suffered by others, by those deemed martyrs and saints in the name of Christ. So by the end of the trip, I actually began to feel physically and psychically sickened by all of this. After visiting a torture chamber in a tower in the Prague castle, I went back to our hotel, took a hot bath, and cried. And I realized, perhaps for the first time, the full extent to which the religion that got built around the beautiful, God-soaked, love incarnate Jesus became in large part a velvet mask, offering sacred cover to brute lust for political power. So that's not to say authentic Christian devotion and faithfulness to the spirit of Jesus disappeared completely. At least I hope not, you know. But the corruption of my beautiful faith in Jesus in the service of the empire really hit me square in the face again and again and again. And it was particularly sobering given that we started our trip in Viktor Orban's Hungary, now the poster child for the MAGA movement's white Christian nationalist fantasies. So I have some thoughts as I consider the moment we find ourselves in as we face the 2024 election. Democracy, inclusion of minorities, gender equality, separation of church and state, these are not the steady state experience of humans throughout history. Excluding hunter-gatherer and tribal cultures, it really hit me that it may be that the values and aspirations of Trump and his minions are more the rule than the exception in recorded human history. And if that's the case, then small d democratic culture, pluralistic societies, and progressive values would be the aberration, not the norm. And that's terrifying. But it's important to recognize this possibility because it helps me punch through my wishful denial that something like Nazi Germany or Putin's Russia could happen here. Some people really do prefer strongmen, even today. Looking at Putin's Russia and Orban's Hungary, it's possible a shotgun marriage between church and state could happen here. So where does that leave us? Last week, Scott said that while we say that the arc of the universe bends towards justice, that only happens when we are the ones bending it. For nearly 250 years, this country has been engaged in a deeply flawed, halting, one step forward, two steps back experiment with democracy based on the consent of the governed, protection from the tyranny of the majority, and separation of church and state. Thanks to over 2 centuries of persistent democratic struggle, we've inherited a massive project of trying to bend the arc of the universe towards justice. It's fragile, and we have no guarantee it will last. But I do believe that healthy democracies are our world's best hope of fostering a just society and a livable planet. Our trip to Europe forced me to see the possibility that the past could be prologue to a future that none of us want. And that's why I'm redoubling my efforts to get out the vote to save our democracy this fall. It may take 100 more years, but I want to make MAGA the aberration and leave Christendom, the marriage of the cross and the sword, on the relic heap of history. I want to apply my weight to that bendable arc and keep it moving in the right direction. Thanks for listening.